Hi, my name is Richard Paxman, and I'm the CEO of Paxman Scalp Cooling, the world's leading company in a treatment called scalp cooling, a cryotherapy system used to prevent chemotherapy-induced hair loss. The company is listed on the First North Nasdaq in Stockholm, Sweden, and I'm now going to share some slides to introduce our exciting company. We've all been touched by cancer at some point in our lives. In fact, there's over 18 million new cases of cancer every single year. Many millions of those patients ultimately have chemotherapy treatment, and many millions of those patients will lose their hair. In fact, if you look at the US market, there's about 650,000 patients every single year that will have chemotherapy. And again, a large proportion of those losing their hair. We understand that the total addressable market in the US alone is around 600 million US dollars. Just looking at scalp cooling and what this means, it's really a device that's used to prevent or reduce chemotherapy-induced alopecia. We're seeing a huge increase around the world in the awareness of this treatment and this product, not only also about hair retention, but a growing interest about its longer-term benefit of hair regrowth. We understand that chemotherapy-induced alopecia is considered one of the most feared side effects of chemotherapy and cancer treatment. We know it's one of the most traumatic side effects, and we understand that's because it's so visible. It can often lead to social isolation. Patients may not want to go to work, pick their children up from school. We also understand it affects a patient's self-image, in some cases more than breast surgery. And then it really affects or prevents patients' desire for that privacy and also some normalcy. And we understand there's certain patients who will say no to chemotherapy because of this difficult side effect. We all have a why, and our why really was when I was just 10 years old. My mum was diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer. She was young and in her 30s, 4 young children, and she didn't want to be that cancer patient and lose her hair. Her hospital here in the north of England actually was offering something called cold caps all those years ago, but unfortunately for my mum, it didn't work. And that was really the first time she was affected by her poor prognosis and her diagnosis. So seeing that distress that it had on my mum, but also the whole family, my father started to do something about it. And along with his brother, started developing our first prototype of device. Over the last 20 years, we've been improving the technology, carrying out extensive clinical trials around the world, and more recently, improving market access. It's really with a vision to make sure no matter where you are in the world, no matter what your income, no matter what your ethnicity, or gender or treatment type, you have access to this treatment. And I believe together we can achieve this. It works quite simply by cooling. So we know how chemotherapy works, damaging the mitotic and metabolic process in cancer cells. Our hair cells are very similar to those cancer cells, rapidly dividing at any one time. So what we do is we cool the patient during treatment. And what happens is, first of all, we induce vasoconstriction, so restrict the amount of blood flow and therefore chemotherapy to the hair follicles. So really reduce drug perfusion. We'll also see this reduction in metabolic rate. Reduced metabolism means reduced cell division, therefore less targeted effect by that chemotherapy, especially important with your microtubule types of chemotherapy, such as your taxanes. And then more recently, we've developed our own cell culture models looking at hair cells and skin cells in vitro. And actually, we see less drug diffuse through the cell membrane, both actively and passively at those lower temperatures. So all these different mechanisms really protect that hair follicle. And the exciting, more mechanistic work that we're looking at really gives us hope for the future to see if we can improve our efficacy overall. So for a medical device company, we have a lot of clinical data. In fact, we have over 8,000 study subjects within our clinical data, something I'm really pleased about. We've probably got the most published and open clinical trials available with any scalp cooling technology. And we really have quite an inclusive approach, so from lots of different parts of the world. So randomized control trials, real world evidence, large prospective studies. The reality of it is that around 50 to 60% of our patients are successful when using scalp cooling, not requiring a wig or head cover, which ultimately gives you a clinical meaningful impact. We get better results with taxane-based therapies and less good results with anthracycline-based therapies. But all in all, some really strong and impressive data, as well as improved regrowth, not just retention. So we have a really nice, compact and easy to use refrigeration system, which we pump a liquid coolant around either a reusable cooling cap or a single patient use cooling cap, depending on the market and the business model. The patient will wear the cooling device for 30 minutes before chemotherapy, during the alopecia-causing chemotherapy, and for 90 minutes after. Our systems are implemented in all shapes and sizes of cancer centre, from your largest academic cancer centre to your smallest community oncology centre also. So a little bit about the business. So back in 2017, we took the decision, based on our FDA clearance, to do an IPO on the first North Nasdaq small cap market in Sweden, really to raise some additional working capital to grow our business in the United States. Paxman AB has a strong board with both UK and Swedish board members. We then have Paxman Coolers Limited, which is really a holding company, and they have Paxman Coolers Limited, where I'd say a lot of it happens. It's our R&D function, our regulatory function, our marketing and manufacturing and accounting function. And then we have Paxman US Inc., our fastest growing part of the business, but also our newest entity. And that's really the distribution channel into the United States. We have an incredibly strong team, and that's grown significantly over the last 5 years, from about 25 people to around 80 people as of today. We have a strong leadership team with all the usual skills and expertise, but really demonstrated a fantastic last maybe 3 years showing the growth of the company. So really mature infrastructure to take our business to that next level. We don't expect to be adding heavy amounts of headcount over the next couple of years, and we're really focusing now on improving efficiencies within the organization. So talking a bit about the adoption of scalp cooling globally, we're certainly not new to this. I think it's important to understand that we now operate in about 60 global markets. We have an incredibly strong regulatory team, which I mentioned earlier, and we are approved in a number of global regulatory environments, including the MDSAP Globalized Harmonized Standard, should I say, and we'll soon be MDR compliant by the end of the year. We operate a different number of models. We have very traditional distributor models in many markets. That's helped us grow and develop over the years. But then we've also started to look at more direct markets and more recurring revenue streams of income. And we can talk a little bit about that later. But our core focus really has now focused on the United States. So as of today, we have about 450 cancer centers using our equipment in the United States. It's about 950 systems, and we've treated well over 12,000 patients. So our business model in the US historically has been quite simple. We install equipment usually free of charge in and across the United States. And then what we do is we actually sell a consumable cooling cap to the patient and generate revenues on a per treatment basis. It's been self-pay for many years, but as of very recently, we're moving towards more of a buy and bill model, where we start to sell the cooling caps directly to the provider, and the provider bills the insurance for some CPT codes we've developed, which we'll touch on shortly. 15 of our locations are now on this new business model, showing promising results. We work with some of the largest cancer centers in America, including MD Anderson, Dana-Farber, MSK, but also some large community oncology groups such as US Oncology. We are only scratching at the surface at the moment and have so much to do and so much more to achieve. I think a really good recognition of where scalp cooling is as of today is the actual adoption of scalp cooling on the global guidelines. We're seeing it on the NCCN guidelines for breast, ovarian, primary peritoneal, and some other cancers. And we also see scalp cooling on ESMO, UCON's ONS, and a French guideline too. And that continues to increase and enhance as we've developed our relationships with these guideline providers. So to look at some of our financials, we've really seen some impressive growth over the last 5 years, although we did have a little bit of a slowdown through COVID, of course. 2020 we were hit with, prior 3 years to that, about 300% growth. What we saw in 2021 is that sort of building up of our order book again, and also our cancer patients now using our services in the United States. And finally, 2022, again, we're back to that sort of normal growth rate, with expected revenues to reach around $15 million for both entities. In terms of revenue by entity, it's about 50-50 split, and you'll see the US has been the fastest growth contributor to the revenue of the business. So a very busy slide and very red, but we've shown significant growth in income, as I've recently said. And in fact, if we look at our sales for this last quarter, which reached 41.3 million SEK compared to 23 million SEK the prior quarter in 2021, which shows a 78% growth. That's about a $4 million revenue for the quarter. For the 9 months, we reached about $11 million US. And as I said before, we hope to reach that $15 million if we continue on the same trajectory. We had a strong EBITDA for the quarter, and our real focus is now to maintain that positive EBITDA. We have high levels of depreciation running through the business based on the capital equipment we're installing into the United States. And we've also seen some effects of some very positive Forex movements as well, which we can delve into if we have a conversation. This is just a nice KPI that we like to demonstrate. This is our average daily treatment revenue growth. So this is the patient growth we're seeing in the United States. So you see where it dipped a bit in during COVID, but then back to that nice quarterly level of growth. And we're seeing about $27,000 US a day in terms of revenue. And again, as I said before, this is only scratching at the surface. We have so much potential and believe we can really see some significant growth over the next 5 years. One of the things that the business is really trying to focus on is moving towards more recurring revenue streams, as we have in the United States. As I said before, we use a traditional distributor model in many markets, which have really sort of worked well under a capital sales model, but we appreciate the need to move more to a per-patient model. We're starting to see these per-patient models in Mexico, in Japan, which is a really exciting market for us, and in Canada. And we'll continue to expand our opportunities in different parts of the world. Although that being said, our capital market still can provide some strong revenue growth, even when selling capital equipment, because we do get a churn of replacement equipment over a period of time. And that's what we're seeing in markets like the United Kingdom, which is established, and also the Netherlands. So funding investments, I just want to talk a little bit about this. Back in 2021, we took 2 opportunities to raise some money. Earlier in the year, after COVID, and some really strong institutional investment interest from Scandinavia, we decided to do a directed issue, really to start investing in our internationalization, but also looking at research and development, and most importantly, reimbursement in the United States. And we'll talk about that shortly. But then again, based on some very exciting news from Medicare at the back end of 2021 and early in 2022, we took another directed issue, again, allowing us to really drive those investments on that buy and bill and reimbursement model. So internationalization, a key focus on the United States still, of course, but also then placing people strategically in places like Scandinavia, India, which is a key market for us, Germany, France, and Spain, and also Canada. What we're also looking at for 2023 is our entry into China. And we've signed a letter of interest with a Chinese partner and are looking to really formalize that agreement throughout 2023. And that could be a really huge opportunity for us. So our buy and bill model. Really, over the last 5 years, we've been focusing on reimbursement in the United States. Although we've had a reasonably successful time with self-pay, the real growth factor will come from the payer paying for this for the patients. So we worked closely with the payer landscape early on, trying to understand what they needed. We, of course, had FDA, but that expanded to help our utilization numbers from just breast cancer to all solid tumor cancers. And then we moved towards the guidelines, and we're now on the NCCN guidelines, something that's really important from the payer community and really will help drive coverage decisions. Later on, then we started working with the AMA to really get a way to pay for these treatments. Now, we developed treatment codes, so CPT codes 0662T and 0663T. The 2T really relates to the placement of the cooling cap and the calibration. That's when they do the education and sizing before the patient receives the cooling cap themselves. And that 0663T is about when the patient uses the device during treatment. Okay, we work closely with the AMA to get these developed. And back in 2021, which I talked about earlier, the CMS actually assigned an APC rate, a new technology APC rate for one of our codes, 0662T. And that's at a rate of around $1,850. And although this was HOP's final rule, we are aware that it's not only for HOPs, but it's also a physician fee schedule as well, which is fantastic. And we're already starting to see the benefits of this. So based on this work we've pushed over the last number of years, we've now started to implement our new buy and bill model, which launched in June this year, a little bit later than we anticipated. And the reality is we work with our distribution partner, McKesson, to support this new business model. So we still place equipment free of charge. We then sell our cooling caps to McKesson Specialty Care Distribution, McKesson Plasma Biologics, and also the GPO Onmark and Unity. And then those cooling caps are sold technically to our customers, but the distribution channel's customers. This is at a fixed price of around anywhere between $1,800 and $2,000. And then ultimately, it's the provider's job to provide that scalp cooling cap as a supply and then bill out using those treatment codes 0662T and 0663T. We're very early days and we've onboarded a few notable customers here and have a large number of customers that are reviewing and looking to move forward. Very early data, but our first benefits investigations, which we support and carry out on behalf of some of these providers, are showing about 80% of our patients are covered. And more importantly, on the claim side, about 90% of those claims are being paid well or as expected by the likes of United, Aetna, Cigna, Medicare, and Medicaid, among other smaller payers. We're delighted with these results, and we really think that should start to help push our growth. RWJ, for example, has already seen 125% in its growth in patient numbers since the implementation of this new business model. And the last area of investment we talked about is R&D. So we have a research centre out of Huddersfield. I'm not expecting the audience to understand where Huddersfield is today, but it's in the north of England, near Manchester and Leeds. We will be on the map eventually. But we've got this great research centre and collaboration. Firstly, looking at how we improve cooling caps in the future, how we make them potentially more consumable and affordable for patients, which means we can potentially look to access more consumable markets in the future, so that recurring revenue stream. And also a product that we're looking to develop or we're in process of developing, which is something topical that the patient can use to enhance or improve their results. We've proven this in vitro in the cell culture models I talked about earlier. We're now using a range of different compounds to look at how we can deliver those to the hair follicles. So we're using nanotechnology to do this. And we're very excited about this opportunity. We believe we can move that needle from 50 to 60% of efficacy up to 70 or 80% efficacy. The nice thing about this as well is that it will eventually also add to that recurring revenue stream model as well. So not only improving patient outcome, which is top of our priorities, but also improving income. Then back in 2019, we signed a research collaboration with the National University of Singapore. So we are now developing a product which is used to prevent or reduce chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy. still a clinical unmet need, as I said, but such a debilitating and costly side effect for the healthcare system and the patient. So it's a cryocompression device, which will be used very similarly to the scalp cooling device. So just before chemo, during chemo, but for a shorter time after. In terms of the market size, it's very comparable to that of scalp cooling, although the global interest for this product is already, I believe, becoming more popular than scalp cooling alone. It's already making it onto the guidelines as a potential recommendation, and there's lots of clinical people talking about how important this unmet need is. So we've developed our first alpha prototype, which was tested in Singapore with some really promising efficacy results. And following that, we've just signed an agreement with SWOG, which is one of the NCI cooperative groups, and they are going to fund a study across 25 locations and up to 700 patients in the United States. I think this is testimony to actually how important this side effect is. So we start those clinical trials in 2023, Q1, and we are very excited about this opportunity. So I'd like to thank you all today for listening. I strongly believe that together we can make a difference for these patients, not only with hair loss, but also peripheral neuropathy. Thank you.